Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to review Telos. So this is a top-down view of the project for the color coordination. So you can see the map of the different aspects and how they interrelate. And the color coding means whether I find personally, from personal judgment, whether I think something is good, neutral, or negative. So what problem or what market does this project currently serve or solve? Well, Telos could be thought of as a distributed computer. And so what distributed computers do is pretty much anything that such as financial games, anything that you don't want someone to be able to copy, repeat, and will behave to agreed upon rules. So distributed computers, trust computers, blockchain, this is one of those generalized platforms. But the thing about Telos is, it has a specific architecture. Many of these blockchains have different architectures, and Telos has a unique architecture as well. But one of the things I wanted to get into that's one of the best markets that it could solve, because think of this as general, there's I'm just going to go into the ones that are the most important, but you could do anything with a generalized distributed computer. Anything that you would want to do with decentralized applications is something that you could do with Telos. So Telos has launched its Ethereum virtual machine. And one of the great components of what market this serves is no front running. This is huge. This is big because front running is very expensive. Even myself, I have paid a lot to front runners. Anyone who uses DeFi has paid a lot to front runners. It's people or miners. They throw in a transaction before your order, and then they throw in a sell. When you put in an order into an exchange, you're going to cause the price to go in some direction. And let's just say, in this example, we're going to say you're going to buy something. So you cause it to move up slightly. But what happens with these front runners is they buy it before you do, then they put in your order, and then they sell. So you end up paying a higher price than you would normally, and you end up losing money because of that. Because they make that gap. They just make that gap from buying and selling before you and selling right after your order. And that is very common in Ethereum. And it's not going to go away in Ethereum either, because the miners are the ones actually doing it. But Telos has removed that. I'm not sure about how big that problem is in other systems, but I do know that it persists in many aspects of DeFi. And this is one of the projects that has removed front running, and that's very valuable in and of itself. That's a valuable service. So this miner's extractable value is what it's really called. And it's basically what we did. Okay, so how does Telos prevent this? Well, it's extremely fast. And that's not a solution because code runs super fast. But the fact that Telos is fast means that there's no latency to these things. But what is a solution is fixed rate gas fee. So orders come in as placed, that is very important. That is very fair. Telos runs, at least Telos Ethereum virtual machine runs in a very fair way because it doesn't switch up how things come in. It's first in, first out. This first in, first out, it doesn't allow for people to jump ahead of other people, and that's extremely important. That's very important. And they also have DAO rule sets for validators, and there's penalties for not failure to follow these rules. So that's what gives it the first in, first out orders. Fees are so small that transactions. So another thing that is valuable about Telos's Ethereum virtual machine is that fees are so small that transactions as low as $1 can be profitable. So microtransactions. And that is a huge market because microtransactions can open up the possibilities for many different dApps that cannot exist on systems like Ethereum, because microtransactions allow for gaming or allow for smaller sets of computation cheaper, less expensive sets of DeFi computation to be paid for. So it allows for, smaller activities, which could be, anything you could imagine, really. Like buying an in-game sword or exchanging it for another sword or whatever, in a metaverse type environment or whatever. So these microtransactions open up the possibilities for, a lot of different things. It depends on your imagination there, which, it could be, that's huge, a big market in itself. Telos does 10,000 transactions per second currently. Now, other competitors claim, I'm going to be comparing Telos to Solana in many cases because that's such a big market cap. And it could show you the potential of Telos to potentially be a high ROI project. So it claims, or Telos does, it's proven that it's done 10,000 transactions per second, where Solana went down after 250 transactions per second, even though they claim that they can do much more. But reality has proved that Solana went down with 250, and it goes down all the time. So it's, so this one is the one that actually can do it, in my opinion, because it's actually proven it. Without going down, Telos has never gone down. Now, okay, so what is the, before I go into how Telos works, what is DPoS? I'm going to just go into one more example of what the Ethereum virtual machine is. The thing that I went over here, the major use case that I'm going over on Telos. Even though, remember, Telos is general, so it can do many different things. But, so when we have a computer, like we could have a MacBook or a Windows-derived PC, but you can run MacBook inside of Windows. You could run a Mac OS operating system inside of Windows. Or you can run Windows inside of a Mac, which means anyone who programmed for Windows can run their application on a Mac, and anyone who programmed for Apple could run in a Windows. So you can run an application in any computer because you can run the virtual machine. So when I write code for a computer, I can write it for MacBook. I write it for that computer to understand. It's basically like that computer's language, right? And then when I write to that MacBook, but if that MacBook's code is running in a Windows environment, it doesn't matter. I can still run that application. That's the importance of a virtual machine. It's someone who wrote the operating system inside of another operating system. And so that I could, it brings compatibility. So anyone who writes to Windows could run on a Mac, and anyone who writes for a Mac could operate in a Windows environment. So what does that mean? Ethereum virtual machine is the same thing. So you got this Telos compute environment. Telos as a generalized computer can run C++ applications, etc. So it has all the capabilities that Telos has as a general computer. But it has inside of it, just like I said before, like Windows could run Mac OS and Mac OS could run Windows. Well, Telos is running Ethereum as a virtual machine, which means anyone who can program on Ethereum can program on Telos. And it means any application that runs on Ethereum can run on Telos. That's the importance of that. So it opens up the floodgates for all these different developers to potentially launch their applications on the Telos environment. And then, so any of the Solidity-based, Ethereum-based dApps can run on Telos. So how does Telos work? DPoS. Basically, the mindset behind DPoS is diminishing benefits for each validator added. And it also has like a feeless structure to it, as the tokens themselves represent computational ownership of this distributed computer. So the Telos tokens actually do equal, like if you have 1% of the Telos tokens, that equals 1% of the Telos computer. So it's actual ownership of this distributed computer, which is quite amazing design of DPoS. But DPoS, so the idea of diminishing returns is like we want some level of decentralization, but the argument that Dan Larimer made back in the day was that there's diminishing returns for each new validator added. As you go into thousands and thousands of validators, there is diminishing returns, and anyone like with a brain could see that that's true. The question is how many validators do you really need? Do you need 1,000, 10,000, etc.? Well, DPoS has settled for 21, but these are of a set of 43 that are voted in by the token holders. And the idea is that each additional validator has diminishing returns for being added, and this at this 21 gives adequate distribution but with the benefit of extreme speed, extreme finality, and there was an analysis made of that. Now, one of the reasons I could find myself agreeing with this approach is because of this book. I highly suggest everybody who wants to understand complex systems reads this book. I read it because I come from a biotechnology background, and I wanted to understand complexity in a general sense, and this book is a good one for understanding complexity in a general sense. And what it settles at is complexity is basically about interrelationships. And if you have too many interrelationships, you have too much complexity and the system degrades. But if there is some optimal number of relationships between systems. This is a broad sense description, but it basically does support the idea of diminishing returns of nodes, and that if you have too many, it's introducing too much of a cost basis, and there's other arguments in there as well. But I would highly suggest reading that book. That's off topic a little bit, but it does help give you a background of why I think DPoS might have a successful future. And anyone who wants to understand complexity, it's a good book. All right, so I'm going to get into. I'll just get right into it. The analysis. All right, future increased demand for the token. I do expect that to be the case. Now, regarding token used for services or governance, the token represents the resources. It represents ownership, and it also represents the DAO. So 1% supply of the tokens represents 1 supply of the total resources, 1% ownership of this computer, 1% of the total vote in the DAO. So Telos is a DAO. It is a distributed computer that is run by a DAO, where the tokens are a vote. So yes, the token is used for services. The token is literal ownership. All right, the value of the target market is large. So basically, dApps, DeFi, DAO run. So basically what market this serves, is a DAO run computational resource computational DeFi or distributed computer. It is a DAO run, DeFi computer that runs at very high speeds, and that serves a $100 billion market, $100 billion market for gaming, $100 billion for finance, and in the tens of billions for verified data records and whatever other thing you could use for your imagination. Now, one thing I will say is, some people say that DPoS, distributed proof of stake projects are not decentralized enough. For those people who make that argument, you could still make the argument that a project like this could manage gaming, because games are going to need to run fast, and only a project like this could really run at those speeds that games would need to run at finality. So and even that's $1 billion market cap. And even as a temporary exchange, if you wanted to use it at its extreme speed for a temporary exchange, with very low fees, you cannot compete with the fee structure of the DPoS because every other system has more and more validators, and so this is going to be one of the least expensive for the trade-offs that are being made. And in my opinion, it's got a huge market opportunity. Even though it does have less validators, and you can take your opinion on that as you want to, on whether or not that argument holds up. If you want to go more decentralized, you can go that path, but you are going to pay a premium for that, and it's going to make some things impractical, like gaming, etc. So there's a huge market for this, in my opinion. All right, regarding social media, you're not early to that. I'm just going to leave it at that, because I did advertise to some channels, and I noticed that there is a decent number of followers on their Twitters, and even 7,000, 100,000 views on some of their videos. So that means a lot of people, they're not super hidden, but still not. It is kind of early on the social media end. because I don't hear a lot of influencers talking about it, etc. Regarding major upcoming events. So regarding their roadmap. So they have a Decide Voter app was completed. That's basically how the DAO works for people voting. But one of the things that was completed recently was the Telos Ethereum virtual machine, which is one of the big applications that I go into. And on January 20th, OmniDex launched. But basically, Telos virtual machine, Ethereum virtual machine, allows for anything that runs on Ethereum to run on this. So that's quite amazing. But it's only launched recently, and it's already got it's only been up for like 10 days, this OmniDex, and it has 10 million in money that's already flown into this OmniDex, the first DEX that has shown up. And likely, we know from network effect being the first one, likely is going to keep its position. So OmniDex is likely to be the go-to DEX on Ethereum, on the Ethereum virtual machine on Telos, because it's the first one to launch and it's acquiring that volume. So what they're completing now, as far as their timeline, is Telos Ethereum virtual machine 2.0, which is just upgrades to the Ethereum virtual machine on it now. And what they completed recently was WebSocket and Explorer upgrades, but they're going to do RPC for exchanges and optimizations, etc. And they're putting their work in there because that's where the adoption's happening for Telos. So they have dStore, which is distributed storage, which ETA on that is unknown for now, but it's decentralized data storage. Cloud storage uses regional detection for proximal optimization of data storage, and D-games, NFTs. So this could be big right here when they complete that as well. That's going to be very valuable in their future at some point in the future, some point in the timeline in the future. dStore could be extremely valuable for Telos as well as a service. And also Telos profiles, Telos private, ZK transactions, and Telos location, which I think is really cool. This provable location stamps for records and apps and applications. So all these different blockchains, dude, are going to exist to serve a market. There's going to be a big, people who think that there's going to be one blockchain that rule them all, it's nonsense, because even this one is going to, Telos is going to service, there's plenty of market available to service verifiable data, gaming, etc. And, for instance, even this Telos location, you can imagine with your, use your imagination, having verifiable data and timestamps could be used, and what kind of applications it could be used for. It could be used for amazing concepts, like in the metaverse that mixes with reality, mixed reality type applications, etc. So, there's just, as one of the reasons in a general sense, when you invest in something, you want to hold for the long term, because people get excited about something, the price pumps and often comes down, people get upset and they leave. But then the applications and all that keeps growing. This market's going to grow, and crypto is extremely early. So, the best, if you want to win in crypto, is buy in the projects where people are continually developing and delivering, and they will find a niche, as long as they are determined to do so, as long as they have that work, the probability exists that they will, everything's probabilities, there's a probability that they will succeed. And also, in the generalized timeline, general adoption of the Ethereum virtual machine. So it should see adoption of that for microtransactions or things that can't be done on other systems. So the timeline is generally a good timeline, so to speak. All right, price FOMO. I think that could be the case in the future. Money needed to move the price up to decrease. Tokens on the sell side to decrease, I put that. Now, negative thing, the price action has been extremely aggressive. It's 19x in performance compared to the average crypto, which is 6.6 over the last year. So, that's always risky when something's pumping. Telos is kind of in a pump, because it's performing better than the rest of the average cryptos. Now, but that coupled with it is at a low market cap. Telos is a low market cap. So that is what diminishes that negative effect, in my opinion. And that's why I put it as neutral effect on price. As far as dividend, okay, so some of the token model stuff. Dividends, demand for so one of the things about DPoS is it has this Rex market. which means you can rent, because your token represents ownership of resources on Telos, you could rent out those tokens. So as Telos gets adopted, you can own these tokens and rent them out to dApp developers who need throughput, who need information and resources, but don't want to commit to buying Telos. They want to pay for it just to rent it. Well, you could rent it out to people in this Rex marketplace. So that is a dividend based on adoption. So if Telos is adopted, if applications are successful, those who own it will see a benefit through dividends by staking to Rex. And right now, the returns on that is about 13%. It runs at that number. Okay, so the token is literally ownership. So, it is, so the success of the platform is tied to that. So the token distribution is not as important because it is ownership. And the inflation rate is controlled by the DAO. So as a token holder, you have a voice in monetary policy. So genesis of this project was in 2018. Whale accounts were capped at 40,000 Telos, and there's no inflation until 2024, and the DAO could decide on that in the future, but it's expected it may not need that in the future as well. So one of the things I will make, this is also the token metrics for distribution. Telos is one of the best distributed tokens out there. It's because of this capped mechanism. A lot of projects have a lot of sell pressure because they have whales. Telos is one of those projects that does not have whales because they got rid of all the whale accounts and they never had a VC. So they're like, so anyone who is like when you get into Telos, you're actually getting in on a project where there's not these people with millions of free tokens that are going to dump on you, which is like Solana. That's another comparison to Solana. This one has a much better distribution. There's a lot higher probability of ROI because there's not a lot of whale accounts waiting to dump on you, not a lot of VCs waiting to dump on you. Telos didn't have that. So that is an excellent way to actually favor the community. The way this launched is much more favorable to the community. All right. So now as far as niche, serving a current niche. Now it is having exponential growth, but it's too early to tell. That's why I left it as yellow. OmniDex is growth in assets is exponential, but it's only been live for 10 days. But it is growing extremely fast, so we'll see if that continues. That's the only thing I'll say with that. But when the thing is after it's already proven to be growing exponential, you'll have the price action. So that's one of the things with that kind of trade-off is after this has grown exponentially, the price will already be set. So if it continues the trend, the price will already be there. So you must speculate on whether you think that it'll continue. And remember, there's no front running to the services provided on Telos. So this OmniDex is offering something that not a lot of DEXs are offering. And it's also the lowest fees. Because of the trade-off of DPoS, you can use this at fees lower than any other blockchain, pretty much. Like it's at pennies compared to others, All right, and then so it does have an open niche, which is servicing now. It is a distributed DAO-run computer, and it has the Ethereum virtual machine with the lowest fees. I think it is the lowest fees, but I'd have to look at every system to know that for sure. First mover or adequate incentive. So it does have high APY and low transaction costs for dApps to bring their incentives in. So I think that I said first mover or adequate incentive. The adequate incentive part is the part that I think is true because as people launch their applications on Telos, they will offer their incentives individually. And so that will be the incentive for people to come into this ecosystem. And there's, the no front running, which is also an incentive. All right, so let's get into the governance. So the degree of decentralization, I put medium, right? Because it is that DPoS. Now, one of the things that is extremely important in DPoS is that those who bought in are represented. Now, Telos capped the whale accounts in Genesis, so they, literally everyone who has bought in either in work, such as the Telos Foundation, which owns 2% of tokens, or the Founders Pool, which is also people who put in work. That is the same. Putting in work is the same as buying in. So it basically the people who because it's got equitable distribution and because the people who put in the work are the ones holding it, not VCs. I gave that as a big benefit for those who buy in representing the token. Now, one of the risks is exchange exchange. Now, Telos comes from EOS, and EOS had many different problems, but one of the biggest ones was exchanges voting with user funds. And so that is a risk that exists with DPoS. It is a major risk point in exchange voter risk, because you think about it, like people deposit all their Telos onto an exchange, and then that exchange votes on their behalf. The exchange didn't buy those tokens, but the exchange can vote on their behalf. In the way that Telos votes, the exchange could vote on. So the exchange didn't buy in, and it's voting. So that is a bad thing that could happen. That was a major weak point in EOS, and actually caused a lot of damage to EOS. But I'm working on the speculation that Telos has passed the greatest risk due to this risk, because DeFi is spreading and more people are not using centralized exchanges. But if people do deposit their Telos in ecosystems where those ecosystems have the ability to vote with those Telos tokens, that could be bad as well. So these are the risks. That is one of the risk factors, is that people who did not buy in the ecosystem receive user deposits and then vote on their behalf. But we're not seeing this yet. We're not seeing this happen. So it may not happen in the future. And if it doesn't, as long as it doesn't, then this won't be the case. And one of the reasons EOS got more damaged by it was because more centralized exchanges were used in the past. There was not a lot of DeFi, but now there's DeFi, and so a lot of people are migrating to DeFi instead of using centralized exchanges. So this weakness is not as prevalent for Telos, so it might be up and coming at the right time. Even though Telos is 2 years old, but it's getting that adoption at the right time. So there's that. So that's one of the potential weaknesses, and that's why I did put it as a little bit of a lighter color for that weakness, because there is that potential that users, that because they don't have a lot of good protections against that. But, they do have some protections against that. So DPoS design, though, it's got top 42 validators are voted in, but the 21 active ones are the top voted for blockchains. Okay, so one of the biggest differences between Telos in the way its governance works and Solana is that Solana is based on whale accounts. So whales control Solana, and Telos is vote. So this Solana is controlled by VCs as far as who puts blocks into the blockchain, and otherwise Solana and Telos are about as decentralized as each other. But Solana is controlled by whales and people with lots of money, so they're not really adding value to the system. They just bought in. Someone else built it, etc. And Telos is based on vote. So those who produce blocks are voted in by the token holders. So what do you think is a better design? Now whales have their benefits, but also votes have their benefits in that Telos is more of a community project, whereas Solana is more of a VC project. And you can see how that helped the price of Solana, because, they can get all the promotion and et cetera. But Telos more likely in ROI will benefit the community because it's community owned rather than giant whales. All right. So mechanism quality, because those who represent because people vote for this project, because people vote for who runs the network, they'll vote for those who add value. And that's the apathy solution. And that also means mechanism of quality, meaning that they're going to vote in people who are adding quality to the system. So the token is the ultimate control of this blockchain, which is a good design, in my opinion. Now, one of the things I wish that they would design in Telos is time lock wait to vote. Meaning if you lock your tokens for some period of time, you get to have your vote. So that makes long-term thinking. I wish they would add that. That would also be a good protection against exchanges, because exchanges don't want to hold it for a long time. And it would also bring long-term thinking. So I wish more systems would do this. Very few do it. Polkadot is the only one that I'm aware of that actually does it. All right, and then technical groups selected by representatives. You have the Telos Foundation and a lot of the BPs. The BPs are technical, so yes, they have technical people representing the blockchain. High quality actions, so making the Ethereum virtual machine is proof that they're doing high value actions because they built that because that was a needed thing, and now you're starting to see adoption of that, and we'll see if it continues. And they're focusing on the Ethereum virtual machine now because they're seeing adoption there. So that high-value actions, we have a little bit of evidence, and we can see that, yes, the governance is working towards making high-value actions, high-value upgrades. high up value upgrades. And so value of services increases, leading to all these cascading events. The user experience is good on Telos. Developer experience is good, standard libraries, etc. You have the Ethereum virtual machine. So all of that is good. And they also have the USIO environment as well. Developer motivation, there's a fund to fund developers. So that a way to do that from the DAO. Best option of the competition, yes, I'd say actually Telos is one of the best for what it's designed to do, which is low fees and extremely fast. And yes, it is one of the best ones in my opinion. And think about it. Telos has a $100 million market cap, and you got something like Solana, which is like a $25 billion market cap. So we're talking about a 200x return just to get to something that's can do the same thing. Like Telos can do the same things that Solana can. I would argue better because they won't actually shut down like Solana has it for a bunch of times. So as far as flywheel, there is a built-in flywheel mechanism. So when applications are successful, it brings in more applications, bringing more users. So if they get that momentum, they will have a flywheel effect based on the inherent design of this blockchain. Network effect is something that I think will happen in the future. All right, so large business models that demand a token to reflect their needs. I put as yes, because a token is resources. So if your DApp is successful, you want to buy the token to do that. And I said there's no major onboards that I could see and no major partnerships that I could see. Regarding, now this is a DAO. So it is, its leadership doesn't matter as much, but it does have over, 1 million users or accounts. So the CEO is not as important. And it's only probably the Telos Foundation, but the important people of interest are Justin Guducci, CEO. He's the founder of Infinity Blocks, and he's got experience in the gig economy. And then he was a UX designer at the Public Transit Authority. But he's the leader of the foundation that is elected by Telos voting with funds, etc. And then Douglas Horn and Jesse Skolman. These are core developers with IT backgrounds who are building out the blockchain. So there's that. But this is more of a DAO. The way you should think about this one is more of a community-run project. So its success depends on the involvement of the community and the voters and etc. All right, so that is the top-down view. Hopefully, I went into every detail that I went over. Now, for summary, I put low market cap with accomplished CEO. I put that as fairly yes because it is it is fairly it's already reached those million account numbers, etc. Which it makes it an accomplished background. It is a live niche, and then I put early to social media. It's not really early to social media, but you could almost say that all those things are green. All right, and okay, so the pros and the cons. Final summary. The cons, let's start with the negative. Weak protection against those who did not buy in from voting, like exchanges, but this damaged EOS in big ways. So that is one of the major risks. Is that but the good thing is that those exchanges are on the decline, and most people are using DeFi, so it might not be an issue. And so the tokens can remain distributed, and the token will be controlled by those who are heavily involved, and that will remain who is in control of the network. It's basically token holders. And then recent price action, it has grown aggressively against other projects. So you always got to be careful when something's been going up. The pros. The good things: excellent distribution and launch with no VC whales. So it's got an extremely good distribution. So it is community run. It's one of the few projects that actually is. It's not, I'd say 90% of crypto projects hurt investors because they have VCs. The VCs are the reason you get screwed because they get something for free. They don't add any value. They just give money up front, and that's the only value that they really add. And that that does add a little bit of value, but they just bring their money, and so they market to everyone, and you see the effects of that. As a token, you are an owner. Very few projects are like that, where the token represents ownership of the system. Most cost-effective blockchain. DPoS is going to remain one of the best architectures for being cost effective. It is a low cap. And its Ethereum virtual machine has broad scope with all the Solidity developers. Anyone who learns Solidity could, they could launch it in Ethereum, but then they could launch it on any Ethereum virtual machine such as Telos. All right. So I think that is everything, guys. So hopefully I did this in an unbiased way. One disclosure is that I did own these tokens before I did this review. That is not usually the case. But because I've owned these tokens for a long time, so hopefully that didn't affect my bias too much. But I hope this review is as unbiased as I could possibly be. And if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. And I hope to bring the most unbiased, highest quality information in the cryptocurrency space that I can.